Hey, imagine you're at a friend's house watching the latest superhero movie and the explosions feel like they're happening right behind you. You love that feeling, but you also know that buying a subwoofer is a bit of a gamble, big, pricey, and you could end up with a box that just booms without any nuance. I've been in that exact spot a few times, scrolling through endless spec sheets and trying to guess whether a 17-inch monster is worth the space it takes up. If you're on the fence about the SVS SB17 Ultra or Evolution, stick around. I broke down what it actually does in a real living room, and the link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about why this sub feels different from the typical Adaboom units you see on the market. The SB17 Ultra uses a high-excursion 17-inch driver paired with a dual 8-inch voice coil design. In plain English, that means the cone can move a lot of air without needing an absurdly massive amp, and the two voice coils give the amp more flexibility to push power where it's needed. The SVS Discrete MOSFET output stage is built for clean, consistent power delivery, so the low frequencies stay tight even when you crank up the volume for a big action scene or a live concert track. Now, the first thing most people worry about with a sub that big is placement. The SB17 Ultra is about the size of a small refrigerator and weighs enough that you'll need to think about where you want it to sit. In my own testing, I placed it against a solid wall in a 20 by 30 foot home theater room, and the low-end response was instant and controlled. The auto room correction system, which includes an outboard microphone, took the guesswork out of the equation. You just pop the mic in the listening spot, run the calibration, and the unit adjusts its internal EQ to compensate for room modes. I tried the same process in a tighter, carpet-covered apartment, and while the overall punch was still impressive, the calibration had to roll back a bit on the deepest notes to avoid that boom feel you sometimes get in small spaces. One of the real-world strengths of the SB17 Ultra is the smartphone app. 6 parametric EQ bands, custom presets, and the ability to tweak the crossover point mean you can fine-tune the sub to match any speaker setup, whether you're driving floor-standing towers, a two-way bookshelf system, or a high-end Dolby Atmos array. I spent a weekend dialing in a preset for my favorite sci-fi soundtrack, and the app saved those settings for future use. The next time I hosted a movie night, I just tapped the movie night preset and the sub instantly shifted from a warm music vibe to the aggressive, fast attack bass required for explosions. So who should actually consider spending the money on the SB17 Ultra? If you're a home theater enthusiast with a medium to large room, say 250 square feet or more, and you already have a decent main speaker system that can handle the mid-range and highs, this sub will fill in the missing low-frequency foundation without sounding muddy. It's also a solid match for serious music listeners who want that tactile bass on orchestral pieces, EDM drops, or vinyl reissues that demand accurate, deep reproduction. The built-in calibration and app give you the tools to make the sub behave nicely even if your room isn't a perfect acoustic box. On the flip side, if you live in a compact studio apartment, have a modest soundbar, or you're mostly watching TV at low volumes, the SB17 Ultra might be overkill. Its sheer size can dominate a small space, and despite the calibration, you'll still end up with a lot of low-frequency energy that could bleed through thin walls or disturb neighbors. For those folks, a smaller 12-inch sub or even a powered subwoofer with a more modest driver would give you the bass you need without the logistical headaches. Let's get into some practical trade-offs that people often overlook. The unit's power consumption is higher than a typical 10-inch sub, so you'll see a bump on your electricity bill if you run it at high volume for many hours. That's something to keep in mind if you're environmentally conscious or on a tight budget. Also, because the driver is so large, it can generate a fair amount of vibration if the sub isn't firmly anchored to the floor. I used a set of isolation pads and a bit of furniture bracing to keep it from rattling the shelf below, and that added a small extra cost and a couple of minutes of setup time. Another nuance is the bass response curve. The 15 Hz to 320 Hz bandwidth with a plus or minus 3 dB tolerance means you'll feel the sub's output down to the lower limit of human hearing. In a well-tuned room, this translates to a clean, extended low end that doesn't overwhelm the mid-range. However, In a room with a lot of bass traps or overly soft flooring, you might notice a slight dip around 30 to 40 Hz where the room absorbs the energy. The app's PEQ can help boost that.